All right, let's talk about this Detroit Red Wings team because I gotta tell you, it's it just is what it is with this team. Um, it's struggling to find the words to what the Detroit Red Wings really are. You watch them on a daily basis, like I do, and you say, "What is this team good at? What is this team really good at?" And when I look at this Red Wings team, it's struggle. It's not struggling to me, but they go play the San Jose Sharks tomorrow. They're 0-2 on their trip. They lost a game to the Anaheim Ducks that they should never have lost. And when you look at their team standings, I mean, let's go over it. They're fourth in the power play, which is pretty good. 22nd in shooting percentage. Goals allowed there 22nd with 3.24. In penalty minutes, oh yeah, they are fourth. They're good. They're good there. Very good team. Top five team. Shots on goal allowed, they're 29th. Penalty kill, they're 31st. We told you in the last podcast this was a big stretch. And we showed you this graphic, California, and you've lost two of them. And it doesn't get any easier once you come back to Detroit because once you come back to Detroit, you play the Islanders, you play the Bruins, you go to New York, you go to Long Island, you play the Flames, and then you play the Devils on that Friday after Thanksgiving. I just got to say this. I'm a little disappointed in the Detroit Red Wings from two aspects. I thought this team would be better offensively. They're not. And it just seems like they're doing the same thing that they did the prior Novembers and Decembers. If you go back over the last 2 years and you look at the Novembers and the Decembers, and you look at how bad the team was in those months, and you look at how good they were in January, February, and then in March, like they kind of fizzled out. But you can't play hockey that great for that long. It's unsustainable. But you look at the way they played in those January, Februarys, and March. They're a more aggressive bunch. If you go back and you look at those games that they played in November and December, you will see a less aggressive team. My issue is not really the talent that's on the team because we all know having guys like Petrie and Sherratt, it's not really good for the defensive back end. When your two best players are young players like Edvinsson and Seider, okay, we could deal with that. But I can't stand when you're a coach and you don't understand where you are good at. Like the Detroit Red Wings are good at being aggressive. They're not going to win defensive hockey games. It's just not going to happen. They don't have the defensive depth. They don't have the defense players to do it besides Edvinsson and Seider. And after that, like it gets really murky. Obviously, you're obviously waiting on Pelika from Sweden to come over here and the young development talent. You got Costa and Augustine, developing goalies in Michigan State and Grand Rapids. But this is not sustainable. And if I'm Derek Lalonde, I got to look at myself in the mirror. I remember when the Detroit Tigers were struggling early in the season. They were struggling, and AJ Hinch knew what the Detroit Tigers were good at. He knew that the Detroit Tigers were not a good offensive team, and they would have to claw to win games. The same can be said for the Detroit Red Wings, but unfortunately, they don't have the coach to understand this. I don't believe the Detroit Red Wings are a bad team by any stretch of the imagination. I just think they're poorly coached. When you're a coach and you know that you're not good at some of the things that you're supposed to do, like I'll give you an example. If you're a coach and you know your team is better offensively, which side of the ball, which side of the puck, ball, wherever sport you play, you're going to prioritize that side of the offense or defense to get you wins. I can remember clearly when Dan Campbell was the coach of the Detroit Lions in his second year as the coach of the Detroit Lions. They started out 1-6, and then the Detroit Lions, we almost slipped them. The Detroit Lions, Dan Campbell said, "We're going to focus offensively because offense is going to have to carry us. They're going to have to carry us. We're not good enough defensively." That's what good coaches do. Unfortunately for the Detroit Red Wings, they don't have a coach that can really figure out that. And unfortunately, the Detroit Red Wings are kind of stuck in no man's land in terms of where they are, where their talent level is, and where they're going. You know, they they won 3 out of 5 in the last 5 before this trip, but it's all going to be pushed to the side because you lost 2 straight. You go to San Jose, you got to salvage 1, and then you got to hope to beat New York, Boston. You got to hope to beat New York twice, or Boston and New York, to just eke out that 3 out of 5 again. But they're not playing to the level that they're supposed to be playing at. It isn't because they're not talented. Their offense is really talented. And when we went over it in the last podcast, we talked about Lucas Raymond needing to get a goal, Tarasenko needing to get a goal, Patrick Kane needing to get going. And they're just struggling to do that. And part of the reason is they're not aggressive enough on offense. And part of that is because of the coaching. I don't know what Derek Lalonde is looking at, but this team is clearly not good enough to be a defensive laden team. They're just not. So focus your team on offense, because that's the way you're going to win. It's an interesting time for the Red Wings, and it's hopefully they get it together. But they I go back to this again. Even strength. They got better, 2 points better in even strength. They got 3 points better in all strengths. They're spending more time in the offensive zone. Unfortunately, it's not enough. And they got to outscore their mistakes. And because they simply can't play a defensive laden game. The stats bear it out. It's not pretty. It's not cool. But this was a couple weeks ago. It's just the Red Wings are struggling. We all know they're struggling. But it's going to be, how can the Detroit Red Wings move forward without totally falling apart? And that's going to be the most interesting thing what happens here in the next couple games, especially with San Jose today, as this video is going to be posted on Monday. It'll be interesting because there's a lot of things that need to be said about this Detroit Red Wings team, and we'll see where they stand after Monday. It's going to be interesting where they're at. Thank you for watching JC Sports. I'm your host, Joe Chap. We will see you in the next Red Alert podcast on Tuesday.